enterprise founders, and we focus on developing businesses and enterprise skills, networking, inspiration for the creation of future startups. And Enterprise Week is a student-led initiative, and we're in collaboration with the St. Andrews Business Club. And we're so excited for the keynote event today. We get to hear from 3 wonderful speakers who are extremely talented, and we get to work with the St. Andrews Business Club. We're so grateful for their collaboration, and I'll pass it on to Marie to introduce them.
Right, just getting the technology to work there. So, Bonnie, is it okay to, are you doing the necessary? I can start?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Well, hello everybody. I'm Marie Patterson. I'm a wellbeing trainer and coach, and this year I have the pleasure of being the St. Andrews Business Club president. So the club is really delighted to be involved with the University of St. Andrews, and in particular the Student Enterprise Society, to jointly host the keynote event of their Enterprise Week. So, you know, in this most strange of times, we're of course, you know, sadly having to hold a virtual meeting, but I've got really fond memories of last year when we were at the Buyer, and we had such a lovely event there, and I'm quite sure that next year we'll be back there again. But in the meantime, we are all learning to live online, and really actually we're so lucky, aren't we, that we can actually do this and that we can connect in this strange way, and I can still see faces even if it's only 9 at a time. And it's really nice to be here and to do that. So the St. Andrews Business Club is over 70 years old. We had a wonderful 70th celebration just not long before lockdown at the end of February. We had the most lovely night at the Old Course Hotel. And the Business Club brings together people from a wide range of businesses to network and to learn together. Learning is one of the important aspects of our club. So most months throughout the year, we have an event with a speaker, or we have a networking event, or sometimes we have a social event. We like some social stuff too. To become a member, there's an annual fee, but that's being offset by a wide range of discounts that are available from local businesses to our members. So we're making that link between our members and the local businesses of St. Andrews. And if you are interested at all in the Business Club, please visit our website. So we also have 2 University of St. Andrews students who are our interns. And we really couldn't manage the club without them. They're absolutely wonderful, and they're a great support to us, and they help us with a lot of the modern stuff, the social media and the technology and so on. They've also started a student branch of the club, and we really hope that that will grow over the coming years, and so that we can link up students with local businesses and really provide some new opportunities for those who are interested in going into business, as I'm sure many of you are joining us here today are interested in. I'd also like to mention our next event, which is being held on Wednesday, the 4th of November, and our guest speaker is Andrea Quinn. She's the Managing Director of GLOCS, and they provide training on the application of behavioural science in the workplace. And you're very welcome to join us. We know it's going to be a great event, so just pop onto the website, and it'll be advertised by the end of this week, and you can book on there. And again, a free event, because again, it will be, as you know, over the internet. And finally, I would really like to thank Sabi and Emily for offering us the opportunity to partner with them for this important event in the Enterprise Week calendar. And now I'll hand over to Sabi to introduce our first speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. It is our pleasure to collaborate on an event with you. So before I introduce our first speaker, I just wanted to explain how the event will work. We'll have 3 speakers tonight, and if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'll have a panel with the speakers after they're all done sharing their journeys. So feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll moderate the questions once that time comes. Or when the panel starts, just raise your hand and I'll call upon you to unmute yourself, and then you can ask your questions directly. So I would like to invite our first speaker for tonight, Brian Horisk, who owns his own web development company and is also currently the president of the Fife Chamber of Commerce. Over to you, Brian.
Thanks, Abby. Okay, so for those who don't know me, I run a web development business based in the tech hotspot that is Cooper, just up the road from St. Andrews. We build lots of standard websites, but we tend to focus on bespoke web applications. That might be an online application system or a booking system, bespoke e-commerce website, or CRM software. Something that you generally can't get off the shelf or needs to integrate with lots of other systems. We're a small business with a team of just 6. We work with lots of small businesses, but our customers also include really big organisations like the Scottish Government, Historic Environment Scotland, the London School of Economics, and even the University of St Andrews. When I was asked to speak tonight to a group of budding entrepreneurs, I wasn't particularly sure because I'm actually not a huge fan of the word entrepreneur. I really don't like it because of what it seems to have come to represent in the last couple of years. An entrepreneur seems to have come to mean someone who has a smart business idea, can pitch a good story, raises loads of funding, succeeds massively, or more often fails massively, makes an exit, and then moves on to the next thing. I sometimes fear the British public think that entrepreneurs are like the contestants on The Apprentice, who big themselves up, are economical with the truth, and often don't really have a clue what they're doing. So I'd like to present an alternative idea of the entrepreneur. It's a bit old-fashioned. You can be an entrepreneur by learning a trade, getting good at it, and then selling your skill to people who need it. Bring in other people to help you, train them in your way of working, and then just keep doing more of it. I started in business in the summer of my 3rd year at Edinburgh Uni, joining a startup publishing company called Student Pages. This is the days before startups, were really a big thing. They produced what we used to call a Yellow Pages for students, for those of you who know what Yellow Pages is. But the real point of it was the discount vouchers inside for things like half-price cocktails, nightclub entry, and 30% off at Shoe. This company is run by 3 students. They had lots of salespeople, but no one who actually knew how to put a book together. And as I knew a bit about desktop publishing, I took over production. I went back again the following summer as the company expanded to cover more cities. I then graduated with a degree in artificial intelligence before it was trending. The 2 main jobs in AI at the time were either in designing missile guidance systems or vending machines for the Mars company, because reliably recognizing paper money in a machine in those days was really hard. Oddly, neither of those jobs really appealed to me. So when Student Pages invited me back full time, I started my first proper job. I was the first employee after the 3 partners, and the second was Ian Leslie, who was later to become my business partner. The company continued to grow and expand until almost every university town had a Student Pages. We worked insanely hard every summer, all through the night regularly, to publish in time for Freshers Week. And in the winters, I took some time off, but also developed the company databases and publishing systems, and then their first website in 1995. The company was ultimately bought by part of the Daily Mail and General Trust Group in 1998. But by that point, I'd had enough of building a business for someone else. I went traveling for 1 year to South America and New Zealand, and ended up staying away for 3. I got a job with MacPack, New Zealand's most famous outdoor company, working in their company databases and eventually working with their web developers, although not actually doing any website work myself, even though that was what I was beginning to think I wanted to do. I had a great time in New Zealand. I was earning a reasonable salary, but essentially living a backpacker lifestyle. I spent all my money on climbing and skiing trips. I stayed there till the end of 2000, so I totally missed the first internet boom and bust. That was my first chance to make a fortune gone. When I came back to the UK, I was cast around of things to do when my old colleague Ian asked me if I knew anything about something called Cold Fusion, which at the time was one of the biggest web development languages, as he had a website I needed developed. I basically said, not right now, but give me a book in a couple of weeks and I'm your man. So I started as a freelance web developer. I did a couple of projects for Ian's company, then started contracting, working for the Robert Gordon University in Aberdeen, building a system for taking online applications. My break there came when the third-party supplier, which was supposed to be building the system process the applications, failed to deliver it. I said that I could do it, and therefore got my first big development project. A couple of others followed, and then Ian joined me as a partner, both of us working from home. At this point, we had one big problem, which was credibility. Every time we went to a big client, they would say, is it really just 2 of you? What happens if you get hit by a bus? And we never really had a great counter argument to this. Some we didn't manage to convince, but there were enough that we did, and we continued to grow our customer base gradually, getting bigger and bigger clients, like the Scottish SPCA. We built several systems for them over the years, and they're still one of our biggest customers. One system tracks every animal they care for from arrival to rehoming. Another helps them handle every one of the 250,000 calls that their helpline receives every year. Around the same time, we started working with the London School of Economics, adapting a system we had built for RGU to help manage the 5,000 rooms of student accommodation LSE have in central London. Again, we still work with them today. In both those organisations, we started with a small project to prove that we knew what we were doing and gain their trust before moving on to bigger and more business critical systems. Eventually, we reached the point of needing some staff. Taking on that first employee was really scary. We meant paying someone a fixed salary, getting an office to put them in, and actually having to go to an office every day ourselves. Once we'd done it once, it got easier, and we gradually grew our team. Having an office and team behind us did help with credibility, but the next big step up for us was to get some public sector work. The public sector generally purchase things via a tender process. The great thing about public tendering is they have to tell you in advance how they're going to score the responses to the tender. If you can get the best score, you get the work. Doesn't matter how big or small you are or who you know, it's all down to the score. The only downside is that you have to learn how to write tenders successfully to get that best score. Sometimes tenders are open to everyone, and that can lead to very big competitions. But sometimes they're only open to those in a particular framework, which is essentially a smaller group of pre-qualified suppliers. We realised that if we could get onto the Scottish Government's application development framework, we'd have access to a lot more public sector work. We felt it was so important for the business that it was worth paying for some consultancy advice on how to turn our experience and knowledge into a successful tender, and it worked. 65 companies applied for 20 places, and we got the 20th place. But that got us onto a framework with people like Deloitte Digital, Capgemini, and Fujitsu. We were by far the smallest company in the framework, but once on it, we could compete with the big guys on price and picked up 2 out of the first 6 projects that came through that framework, including one for the NHS and one for the Scottish Charity Regulator. That experience has led us on to lots more public sector projects, including the one we've just completed for Scottish Procurement and one that will shortly launch for the National Museums in Edinburgh. That's how we got to where we are. Coming back to my concern about the word entrepreneur, it was brought home to me by an experience that Ian had at a business event last year. We've been to several pitching events where one of those people with a smart idea gets up and tells an inspiring story and then asks everyone for money. At this event, Ian was talking to an investor who asked about our business. And he explained how we had started and grown and how we currently operated. We don't sell a product. We work on just a few projects at a time. We've grown very slowly and carefully. The investor listened politely and then said, "Oh, just a lifestyle business then?" Well, I'd like to stick up for the lifestyle business. We spent a long time building our business, gaining experience by starting on small projects, then moving on to bigger ones, making our own luck by doing lots of different projects for different types of business, and therefore able to turn our hand to lots of types of problems. Growing the business slowly, never borrowing to expand, being profitable from day one. One of the great advantages of this is that you're never beholden to someone else, like investors or shareholders. A few years back, Ian decided he wanted to go and live in Singapore for a couple of years because his wife got a great job there. The only person he had to convince of why this was a great idea was me. We both had kids. We were able to choose to have our regular afternoons off to spend time with them before they started school. So we have the flexibility to work the way we want to work. We do have sales targets to hit, but we set those ourselves with a bit of help from a mentor. Our customers appreciate our authenticity. Because we're a small business, we're always close enough to the cold face of the projects that we work on that we know how things work. We take the time to understand our client's business, take on board their issues and try to solve them. There's no sales guy making promises that our development team can't deliver, because we're all still part of the development team. Although I don't do much day-to-day coding, I still know how everything hangs together and where to look if something isn't working right. I'm not going to pretend there's no stress in our way of running a business. If we don't bring in the work every year, we might get paid less than our staff or even not at all. But it is our stress to control, not something someone else places on us. Of course, the disadvantage of doing business this way is that it's not massively scalable. So we're not going to get fabulously wealthy. But as long as I can make a decent living, have a comfortable life, I'm happy with that. The offensive word to me in just lifestyle business was not lifestyle, it was just. I don't want to knock the funded startup way of doing business. It has its place, particularly if your idea needs a lot of investment, either in research, development, or marketing to get underway. A lot of good people do it for the right reasons, but it's not the only way. I know people who have done it. One guy I know had a successful design agency. He came up with a great website idea, which started as a hobby. He put his heart and soul into it, grew it organically for a year or so, started to get some real recognition, and then realized it had potential as a product. It might have been a reasonable lifestyle business, but there was a window of opportunity to make it really big, so he jumped on the venture capital bandwagon. Getting some investors, dropping other customers to work solely on this project, expanding the team, building the next great version, preparing for another round of funding, getting more investors. They had some very high-profile backers, great publicity, and a new app to be launched at a very high-profile event. And then at the very last minute, a key investor pulled out, and suddenly all the plates stopped spinning. By now, their costs were way too high to be supported by their income. They'd exhausted all their other funding prospects, so they had no choice but to go into administration. All the staff lost their jobs. He lost control of a project and business he had put 5 years of blood, sweat, and tears into, and that was that. He has gone on to do other very successful things, and he claims he doesn't regret anything, but I wonder. The VC model doesn't care about individual businesses. Venture capitalists back a lot of businesses and work in the percentages. As long as they get a few successes, the many failures don't matter to them, but they matter an awful lot to the people involved. And even among those that do succeed, there are so many examples of founders who end up with little or nothing, while the investors take the lion's share of the profit. The word entrepreneurs come to embody people who follow this bumper path, like the tech rock stars aiming to move fast and break things. But an entrepreneur is anyone who has chosen not to take the salaried job path, but decided to start their own business, provide employment, putting their own earnings on the line. We happen to have done this in the tech industry, but it could equally be the plumber under your sink, your local gift shop, wedding photographer, or marketing consultant. These are all just as much an entrepreneur as those sitting in front of the VC asking for $500,000. And they're just as vital to the economy, if not more so, providing for themselves, their family, and their employees. So I would just ask you to consider, when you have your great idea, what sort of entrepreneur do you want to be? You might think it's worth it to go for the big bang approach, but that has big risks. Sometimes it's worth thinking about growing more organically. You might be able to build a better, more sustainable business that way. Better for your customers, better for your employees, and ultimately, better for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Brian. Okay, next up we have Caroline Rockford. She is a self-employed equality and HR consultant and is the former president of the St. Andrews Business Club. Over to you, Caroline.
Thanks, Sabi. Well, good evening, everybody. It's my absolute pleasure to be here with you this evening. And it feels very different, Sabi and Emily, to be on this side of the fence, being a speaker as opposed to doing the introductions. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Caroline Rochford, and I run a HR and equality consultancy. So I basically help business owners hopefully sleep better at night when they can give me their people problems to look after with them. I'm going to start at the very beginning, actually, because when preparing for this talk today, I realised that actually my early years had quite an impact on my future choices and behaviours, and I'll explain why. So I was born ages ago into a farming family. All my relatives seem to be in farming, in Cambridgeshire, in a tiny little village called Woodhurst. I was the youngest of 3 children and the only girl. And no, I wasn't spoiled. So I'm just going to share a photo, first of all, because I think that might be easier. So here we are. Who doesn't love a picnic? This is an early photo. My parents didn't take many photos of us. I don't know why. That's probably a different presentation. I'm the little one on the right, in the yellow cardie with my 2 big brothers, Alistair and Duncan. My mum is standing up and she's with her 2 sisters, and we're having a picnic in a tatty field.
Caroline, we
I don't
can't
think we
see
can
your
see it,
photo
Caroline.
at the moment.
Caroline.
Oh,
Oh, there we
can't
go.
you?
No, it's working now.
Fantastic.
It's working now.
Oh, okay.
So cute.
No, you can't see me. Okay, back in the room. I grew up an absolute tomboy. I was quite happy playing on the farm, and I went to boarding school at the age of 7 and was there for 10 years, leaving as head girl. I thought that boarding school was going to be like Enid Blyton's fictional school, Mallory Towers, a sort of precursor to Hogwarts, if you like, but far less interesting. It wasn't at all like that, and actually was quite dull most of the time. You had to make your own games up. You have to work hard, you ate appallingly, and you lived for the weekends. But it taught me a great deal of independence from a very early age. I knew what I wanted, and I was very focused on that. I was also incredibly cheeky and quite sporty, and I think I'm probably both still those things. I thought I'd check out my school reports, actually, which range from Caroline has made a promising start and her lively personality is a great asset. Lively personality really means she talks too much. That was at the age of 8. And then latterly, in carrying out her duties as head girl, Caroline has shown charm and tact, as well as qualities of leadership. I'd like to think that I've carried that on. But as a farming family, it was a very practical upbringing. You got on and did things, especially when I was working on the farm during the school holidays. When I was literally old enough to reach the pedals in a car, I was taught to drive. It was in a Mini, and there were bricks put under the seat to shove the seat up close enough so I could reach the pedals, and I was actually 9 years old. I therefore drove the tractor and trailer every harvest until I left home. The skills I learned at that point were quite valuable. How to change a wheel on both a car and a tractor. And you may laugh, but I did have a car share where the guy that I shared a lift with didn't know how to change his puncture, and I did it in my Wren's uniform. It taught me how to work hard and very long hours, especially at harvest time. And I learned the importance of how it felt being in a minority of women to men. And literally, I felt that my whole working life until I started my own business 12 years ago. Now I'm going to try and just share my presentation, so bear with me. Okay. Can somebody tell me if you can see that?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
we can.
Cabby, thank you. So at school, a Wren's officer came to speak to us, and that's when I decided I wanted to join up. I initially wanted to be a helicopter mechanic, as you do, but actually decided to join up as a cadet Wren radar, which I duly did in May 1984, when this bunch were number 1. I think Marie's going to help me play this, hopefully.
I will try. I'm not certain. Let's see whether it will work. It did work in our dress rehearsal. Oh, there we are.
I think that's all we're getting, actually. Don't worry.
It's
I think you get the general gist. It was the 80s. So you'll therefore notice that I didn't go to university, and that might be fairly unique in this audience, although I'm not sure. I know that there will be many here this evening who are currently studying at university, and I suppose my message for everybody is that whether or not you have a degree, you can be successful in business, whatever you're studying and whatever level of qualification that you have. So in the Wrens, there were a number of skills that I learned. Teamwork, timeliness, being smart, compliant with rules, and being respectful. They were all skills I thrived on, and ultimately in 1985, I was commissioned as an officer at Britannia Royal Naval College, Dartmouth, becoming a 3rd Officer Wrens. The closest thing I can equate Dartmouth to is a sort of management leadership qualification. It was incredibly tough, actually. There were only 14 Wrens on my course out of all of the college, and we all passed out. That doesn't seem many, but you should be aware that there were only ever 45 Wrens officers who were commissioned in any one year. approximately 3,000 Wrens were in the service, and there were only 300 officers. So we were quite an elite group. And actually, I held the record for being the youngest officer passing out of Dartmouth in the Wrens. So I served in several different places, Portsmouth, London, Portland and Yeovilton, before coming up to Rosyth. My roles as an officer were what you'd probably term administration and logistics now. And when serving at Portland, I made my acting debut in a Wrens recruitment film. Now, again, I don't know whether I'm going to be able to show this, but if not, I'll send you the link. Could you have a go at showing the video, please, Marie? I'm not sure. Can anybody tell me if you could see that?
I could hear the background music, but I couldn't see the video.
Okay, what I'll do is I'll move on then, and I'll send the link round because I'm sure you'll all be desperate to see me in the Wrens promotional video.
Someone could see it. I guess maybe it's just. Wait. Could you see the video, Mary?
No, I can't. Oh, right, I could see it. Ah, some people can.
Some people can see it. I'll let it run for a bit then. It runs for about 45 seconds. And if you very, very carefully watch it, then you might see me, the back of my head.
I think if you click on play on the computer, it should show it on if everyone clicks play on their own computer.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Stanley. I can't see it at all, so just let me know when you want me to continue.
I didn't spot you.
I was right at the beginning with very, very curly dark hair. But if you actually watch the video in full, at about the 10-minute point, I get probably about 2 minutes. So I'll have to share that with you another time. Oh, somebody could see it. Sabi, do you want to just let me know when you want me to continue?
Yes, I think just 10-15 more seconds, I think, so everyone will have seen it by that point, and then we can start. I'll tell you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
I kept George Michael running for ages. I had you in the background and George Michael on the front.
Oh, perfect partnership.
I think we can start now.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Sabi. That video was filmed at Portland when I was working in the sea training. And my report there described me as having an agile mind with a natural flair for operations, enthusiastic and unstinting in her efforts. Caroline made a significant contribution to the achievements of the sea training task. I think enthusiasm and being unstinting in efforts are certainly two skills that you really do need when you're running a business. I also had some quite challenging people problems as a very junior officer, which probably led me to a career in HR. I learned the importance of just reaching out to those who are more experienced and being mentored by them. And then next time it might be me actually doing the mentoring and helping to somebody else. There were many, many skills I learned in the Navy: networking, talking, listening, especially before acting, empathy, resilience, self-discipline, and seeing a task through from start to finish, no matter how hard it gets. And of course, the 7 Ps. Prior preparation and planning prevents piss poor performance. There were plenty of opportunities to learn too, and in my last 2 years of service, I was able to study for my CIPD qualification at Dundee College. I had at that point decided to pursue a career in HR, so I travelled from Lucas to Rosyth every day, and then 2 days a week, I then went back up to Dundee for my evening course. And finally, before I move on, I just want to say the other thing that I think I particularly learned when I was in the Navy was to nurture talent. We were always encouraged to identify skills in others who you in turn could recommend for promotion. Yes, it did mean a lot of report writing, but it is something that I really enjoyed. So during my REN service, I met and married my first husband, John, who left to study medicine at Dundee University, which brought us both up to Scotland back in 1991. At the end of my commission in 1993, I left my last job in the Navy and moved on to life in Civvy Street. My first job was working in store design Havelock in Dalgety Bay. Sadly, it went into administration, I think, last year, but I worked there in production. I was totally out of my comfort zone. For a start, nobody called me ma'am, and I couldn't understand a word anybody said. They were all broad Fifers, and I had to wear ear defenders and couldn't, obviously, lip read. I knew absolutely nothing about production. I did know about people management, but I didn't even know what MDF stood for. It was an absolute baptism of fire. I struggled on for a few months until relief came in the form of an HR job in the NHS. I fell into the job, which I had a qualification to do, but actually I hadn't worked in HR at that point. Once again, it was tough. I was working in a pretty tough area in terms of mental health in the community, providing HR advice to 1,000+ managers and staff. But you learn a lot from those that you work alongside. After a couple of years and a baby boy, I applied for a job with the Fire Brigade. You're probably seeing by now the theme of male-dominated worlds that I was living and working in. So I started at Tayside Fire Brigade in 1996 and worked hard both within HR and equality and diversity, which was an additional work stream that I had. I managed to get the department to go from a department of me to a department of 5. We won awards for equality and we had great success in recruiting more diversity to the fire service. I then became determined to become the first non-uniformed head of department, head of personnel, which I eventually did. Initially, it seemed to go quite well, but as my team started to leave for other jobs, I wasn't allowed to replace them. I began to feel very unsupported and overworked, and actually became pretty miserable in the job. I'd worked so hard to get to that place and then became overworked, stressed, shouty, tearful, and just felt under constant scrutiny from senior uniformed people who seemed incapable of seeing how much I was struggling. I was also dealing with some very difficult employee relations with a very militant trade union, the Fire Brigades Union. And they didn't want to deal with me because I didn't wear a uniform. I was treated differently in meetings. Other senior managers called HR pink and fluffy, and I seemed to be the only one knocking my pan in to deliver on strategy, trying to deliver higher results than my colleagues. I also know I wasn't a supportive manager to those left in my team. And I had to learn a great deal of humility when I realised this. And those became some of the hardest conversations I've ever had to carry out. Something that people don't talk very much about these days is how important their faith is to them. And during my years at the fire service, my faith became an anchor, which saw me through some very dark times, including a divorce and essentially a breakdown. My husband, Mark, and my sons and stepsons were all absolutely lovely, but it was a very difficult time. Sometimes you just have to take life full on. And so I did. I took the decision to leave and start my own company, Caroline Rochford Consulting HR. Back in 2008, when I started, there was a considerable downturn. I can't move this slide now. I'm not going to worry about that. Don't worry about that. I'll come back in the room so you can see me. It was definitely not a great time to be starting a business, especially when I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I'd worked in the public sector. I couldn't take clients with me, and all I had was a domain name and a vague idea of what I wanted to do. So what can I share with you about starting a business? Well, armed with my domain name and lots of lovely stationery and a new laptop, I was all ready for business. How to get it, though? I used various means. The hardest one, I think, was cold calling. I literally went through the press for job adverts, looked at all the companies that were recruiting at the time, thought they must be actually doing reasonably in business, and tried to contact them. It's hard work, but it did result in me landing one of my longest serving clients after many dead ends, of course. I also tried my hand at sales, betterware sales, literally going door to door. I needed something to keep me going, and this did give me some focus and a bit of income, though not very much. I used to work hard, probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 days a week doing that, and got enough money to put fuel in my car. It helped, if only because I had to meet people. I had to deliver the goods, literally, and it taught me a lot about life and people. I was quite sad, actually, to say goodbye to some of the older folk that I'd been delivering betterware to. It made me realise the importance of connection and friendship. So I eventually got my first contract through a lovely woman that I met via LinkedIn. And ultimately, I worked with Jill for quite a short time. She introduced me to Henderson Loggy, the chartered accountants in Dundee, where I got my first contract. I also did some volunteering. It was one of the best things I ever did. I volunteered on the board of Fife Women's Aid. Again, I learned a huge amount as a trustee of a charity, and that has assisted me with my own work. I met other business contacts. I felt a valued part of a team and part of something bigger than just me in an office in my house, which was also very important at the time. And also, actually, through that and through my network that was beginning to develop, I got more business. Networking might not be for you, but it is essential. And I know that I met a lot of fantastic people, really helpful people through networking. I know also that my Navy training helped. It looks really good, doesn't it? It looks so easy just walking into a room, but actually I have found it very, very difficult at times. You're really super nervous. You walk into a room and everybody's talking in groups and you're trying to get into a group, and it can feel really horrible. I suppose we as business owners and part of a networking group should always be aware of that when we've got people trying to get into a group. So here are my tips for what they're worth. Surround yourself with loving people who believe in you. Mark and I have been married for only 2 years at the point when I left a good, solid job for the brave world of self-employment, and I absolutely couldn't do anything that I've done without his and my children's support. I say children, they're in their 20s. Know your business inside and out. It sounds so obvious, doesn't it? But you look pretty stupid if somebody's asking you something fundamental about your business and actually you can't answer that. And you still see it on Dragon's Den. It never ceases to amaze me. You can't possibly be authentic if you don't know about your business. Know your competitors. I've found my competitors to be incredibly lovely and helpful. I've turned to many of them for help. I've also turned to them to pass on work. So don't necessarily see them as the enemy. Get free help. I attended a lot of courses through Business Gateway when I was starting up on my own, because when you're starting up on your own as self-employed, you are your own accountant. You need to learn about being your own accountant, being your own business developer, being your own IT support guru, being your own marketing and comms person. I've since learned a lot about all of those different things, from being on this committee, from working in a range of different organisations, but it hasn't always been that way. So make the most of all of the free help that there is. It is a perpetual learning experience. Always add value. Imagine what it would be like for your business if any one of your clients had chosen another supplier, and make sure that they feel valued. Value them and treat them like you never want to lose them. But be aware also that not all business is good business. And after 12 years in business, I am still learning that. I am getting a bit better, but it's hard. Sometimes you just have a vibe about business or about a particular manager or leader, and you need to listen to your instinct. Sometimes it's because they don't share the same values as you do. So listen to your inner voice and don't be afraid to pull away and not work with them. As I said, be yourself. In business, especially being self-employed, people buy you just as much as they're buying your service. So be authentic. There will be bumps and scrapes along the way. I had one, and a good friend and colleague said to me, asked me actually what I had learned from it, and it really stopped me in my tracks. I hadn't even thought about that. I was so busy being all mopey about it. And it was such a fantastic coaching question to ask. It was revolutionary to me. I then went and wrote a blog about it. So it's always a good thing to do, to reflect on things when they've gone wrong. Learn from other businesses and look at what they are doing. I did a lot of research when I was designing my current website. I looked at loads of other websites. I looked at my competitors' websites. I looked at the websites that I particularly liked, that I found easy. You can always look at what other people are doing, not necessarily to copy it, but definitely getting good ideas. And getting support. I have been inspired by a lot of people through the business club and other networking groups. And as a result of making friends with them or networking with them, I've read more widely. People challenge you in terms of blogs that they're listening to and books that they're reading. And I've learned to podcast because of what somebody else has said to me, and I've learned to run a successful business networking group. Never stand still. You can't afford to. There's always something to do running your own business. So even during this pandemic time, there have been opportunities to learn new skills. For me, it was podcasting. But you've always got your website to refresh. There's volunteering opportunities. There's lots of things that you can be doing. Recently, I was contacted by Dundee Volunteer and Voluntary Action by their business planning officer, who'd come across my podcast. And it led to me offering them to do a 1 hour free seminar that I gave to their circle of charities and voluntary organisations, which I was happy to do. I've got lots of now 25 years of HR experience. And it seemed to me a really good idea to actually just offer that 1 hour free seminar to just share the knowledge, really. It may or may not lead to anything, but that's not why I did it, because it's just a good thing to do. It's been interesting looking back. I can't believe the journey I've been on. So ambitions, the only real ambition that I have to fill is that I would love to keep bullocks for beef. I have always wanted to do this since I was 6 and stayed on my uncle's farm, and I've not managed to do that yet. And any regrets? My regret is, well, I didn't go in a tank when I got the chance, and I don't suppose I ever will now. I regret not challenging more firmly the fact that I was paid less than my male colleagues when I was the head of department in the fire brigade, and I regret not doing this sooner. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll send you the video because I'm sure you're all dying to see me. And thank you for letting me share my story and insights with you this evening.
Thank you so much for that, Caroline. Thank you for sharing your journey with us. And I'll ask our final speaker for tonight, Margot Woolner, who is currently a student at the university, who is an author and the founder of her own sustainable fashion company called Ensemble. So over to you, Margot.
Hi, can you guys hear me all right? Good, awesome. That makes it easier. Thank you guys so much for having me here to speak to you. It's honestly the biggest honor to not only be considered to say anything for St. Andrews Enterprise Week, let alone to be one of the keynote speakers. So thank you guys so much. When Emily first reached out to me in August to take part in this week's activities, I was so excited. I felt so special. And then as more events got announced and I saw the people I'd be speaking alongside, that excitement went to dread in about 4 seconds. The announcement that the other keynote speakers would be Brian and Caroline was quickly followed by a very deep LinkedIn stalk of each of them, which then led to a teary call to my mom of, "Mom, these people are actual grown-ups. There's no chance I can speak alongside them." My freak out over writing and giving a keynote speech is probably a bit ironic given the time that I've spent studying famous speeches, attending speech writing conferences, and heck, writing a book on how to create an audience for speakers. For someone who has done all this research and given a fair few speeches, the feeling of dread remains each time I start a new one. This feeling comes not from a lack of knowledge or an absence of preparation, but instead from a fear that I'd be seen as silly, naive, too young, or in over my head, which I know, shocker, a 21-year-old with the fear of being judged. But this feeling of excitement turned dread is not at all new to me. When I was 17, I applied from Colorado to the University of St. Andrews, which was sold to me as a quaint and elite Scottish university where I was all but guaranteed to find my Prince William and become the world's next top mind. I have always aspired to be a business owner, so I applied as an economics and management student, which I thought would be the quickest way to get there. Note that I had never studied economics nor management, and I really had no real interest in either. Regardless, I was sure that my move across the pond would bring excitement, intelligent midnight conversation with my oh-so hoity-toity hallmates, and a world of opportunities. While these three did definitely accompany my arrival in St. Andrews, I was also faced with the knowledge that I had zero idea what I was doing. The excitement for my classes was very quickly interrupted when, on the first day of macroeconomics, I was asked what GDP stood for, and I very smugly replied, "I'm not stupid, that's the currency here," which, don't worry, I now know that GBP is British pound sterling and GDP is the gross domestic product. My excitement for a deep philosophical conversation was squashed when I realized I couldn't understand my homemade Scottish accents for the life of me, and my hope for a world of opportunities quickly turned to a hope for a world without essays and readings. I soon realized that my courses in economic and management, though sold to me as the surefire path to a career in business, were instead for me a surefire path to failing out of university. I was shocked to realize that my plan to become the next Fortune 500 CEO was destroyed by the fact that I just disliked the beginning steps of that plan. So I decided to switch things up a bit and study two things that I actually thoroughly enjoyed: English and psychology. This decision was accompanied by a lot of existential dread over how on earth I would manage to turn an English and psychology degree into a business, but to this day, it's the best decision I've ever made. In the summer of my first year, I finally found my golden ticket into the business world. I would start a company that rented dresses out for events for a decent price. This would not only help me gain the business expertise and experience that I thought I had lost when I decided to switch my degree, but I'd be able to help fix a very prevalent problem in my lovely little town. So I put together my business plan. I would have students lend their dresses and then that they weren't wearing, and then I would rent these dresses out at 1/10 of what they actually cost. The ideals of sustainability and community that embodied this company stirred a genuine passion in me, and I couldn't wait to get started. I began to design a website, a pricing system, a mission and vision statement, you name it. I had it all under control, and I was ready to begin the legal process of incorporating the company when a quick glance over my student visa threw a bit of a wrench in the works. It said, and I quote, I'm going to get this, "Tier 4 students in the UK are not allowed to start a business, undertake business-related activity, or be self-employed." So obviously that would have put a bit of a damper on my plan to start a company as a student. At this point, though, I was determined to get this company up and going. Luckily, a form of relief came when an international management company offered to create the company for me and employ me as a part-time employee. And luckily, Ensemble thrived, and I patted myself on the back for an entrepreneurial solution to a difficult problem. I was certain that the 20-hour weekly work limit, imposed by my visa would be easy to juggle alongside my coursework and social life. And for the first 7 or 8 months, it really, really was. And then November hit, and I was faced with something that had surely never been on my life plan or my business plan, an unforeseen and honestly quite frustrating shift in my mental health. When you sit down and think about your life plan, very, very rarely do you plan for anxiety or depression, regardless of the fact that there are very real, very prevalent aspects in each of our lives. I saw choosing my personal needs over the company and my coursework completely inappropriate and unprofessional. I strived to do everything I had done before I started to feel this way, but instead of feeling satisfied and determined as I always had, I just felt tired. The following April, I realized I wasn't really getting out of my funk, and I needed to switch. I needed to switch because I wanted to love what I was doing again. I ended up saving up money from my dress rentals company so that I could visit a psychologist without having to bug my parents for the money or even tell them that I was going. My pride and my view of myself as a badass boss lady made me think that prioritizing mental health was embarrassing and something to be kept quiet. Long story short, I slowly began to realize that it's okay to take a second to focus on yourself and make decisions for yourself, even if they aren't the best for your studies or your career, because ultimately it's the way that you feel, you view and treat yourself that determines your future successes. So feeling like I had myself back on track a bit, I decided to deep dive into what I loved about my degree and my company. And I realized that my passion really lied in the combination of leadership and the people that I was lucky enough to work with. And I decided to research this from more of a psychological standpoint. This research and passion then turned into a 40,000-word document, which I soon submitted to be published as a book entitled Creating an Audience. Following a few months of work with, I think, 5 different content editors, 3 marketing editors, and a few more publishing editors, my book was published and available online in bookstores. It was absolutely insane and incredibly gratifying feeling to hold the books in my hands. And it was the first time I'd really, created something for and by myself, and it was so inexplicably wonderful. This book opened up a few really special opportunities for me, one of which was the chance to draft a memo for Joe Biden's political advisory team during the US primary elections. Having very minimal experience in politics, this task presented itself both as a challenge to my research skills, as well as a test of the lessons I'd put forth in my book. With a 2-week time limit and a very important client, this is a project that forced me to confront my capabilities and overcome my mental blocks. I felt too young and too uninformed to provide advice to the potential future president of the United States. Rather than concentrating on my drawbacks, though, I focused on the areas in which I thrived, and I ended up drafting a successful memo, which was then pushed to Biden's advisory team. This then led to my current boss reaching out to me in February, having seen my CV. I'm super lucky to be working now as the head of communications and content marketing at TO, which is a London-based tech startup. When I moved back to St. Andrews in August, the realization that I would need to sell Ensemble, my dress rental company, hit quite hard. And though I'd known that I'd have to sell the company, that I considered my baby since the day it started, the decision was so evident when I began to try to juggle coursework, Ensemble, and my part-time job at TO. I'm so grateful for Bonnie, who put me in contact with the St. Andrews Entrepreneur Society, who I can very excitedly and proudly announce agreed to purchase and run Ensemble recently. And with the realization that I'd have to leave Ensemble behind, came the realization of, oh no, I'm a 4th year. This is the time where I have to make decisions that define the rest of my future, the rest of my life. And thus, existential crisis number 3 or 4 or 15 began. My mini quarter life crisis helped me realize that I want to make a brand new life plan. So for the last few weeks, I've been working on that and applying to law school in my free time. When Emily suggested that I share my journey and some lessons, I had a moment of, yeah, okay, but I'm 21, I'm a kid. What place do I have to share lessons and speak alongside these incredible leaders in their industry? And although I know nearly nothing about the business world, I think there's one big lesson that still applies to, enterprise, authorship, and really everything that any of us are going to do. And I do feel really silly giving this piece of advice because I'm consistently working on it and then forgetting to follow it and then relearning it and then applying it and then forgetting to follow it again. But I think my journey is a really neat example of this lesson. I'm 21. It's been 5 years since I applied to St. Andrews as an economics and management student. 4 years since I then flipped to that degree 180 degrees, 3 years since Ensemble began, 2 years since I began writing my book, a year since that book led to the biggest challenge thus far with Joe's memo, 8 months since I began working at TO, 2 months since I began the Ensemble handover, 1 month since I started stressing over this speech, and a day since I began my brand new plan to attend law school part-time. If I'm an exemplar of anything, I'm an exemplar of the fact that paths and plans change all the time, and that change will always, always, always be accompanied by massive amounts of fear and anxiety, but equally massive amounts of excitement. Throughout these changes, it's absolutely vital to do what you love and to continue to check in on yourself and your mental health. Thank you guys so much for having me today, and a huge thank you to Brian and Caroline. I really appreciate this opportunity so much, and I look forward to chatting with you all in the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Margot. Thank you for sharing your journey with us. So now I will open it up to questions and answers. So if anyone has a question, please raise your hand and then you can unmute yourself and ask your question directly. Or you can put it in the chat as well. So it's up to you guys. Yes, Mario, go ahead.
Very much. When you mentioned in your
sorry, Mario, I think you're disconnecting a little, or is this on my side?
I'm going to
Mario, you're breaking up quite badly. We're not able to hear you at all. Can I suggest that you put your question into the chat, please?
Will do.
Thank you. We heard that bit clearly, but not the question you were trying to ask.
Yeah, since switch the camera off would help. Can you hear? If in the
No,
might be better for you to
put into chat.
In chat, yeah. Can I ask all the speakers that all speakers would want to change, if anything? So Margot, would you want to go first?
Sure, sorry, I realized my mic was muted. Yeah, I think this is actually such a good question, because I feel like looking back while I was writing this, this kind of came up a lot. There's one of my favorite quotes, and I think it's from a song somewhere, is that like, there's nothing that I'd take back, but it's hard to say there's nothing I'd regret. So there's maybe some things, you know, that were challenging, or that I didn't, you know, do as well as I could have. There's definitely some things that I didn't do as well as I could have. But I don't think that like I'd take any of them back, really. I think I learned a lot from all of them.
Thank you. Caroline, would you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, I think for me, it's getting back to the question that somebody asked me. You know, what would you do differently? What did you learn from that? I wish somebody had asked me that question in about 2008 and every year subsequently. What have you learned this year? Instead of actually being on the escalator, sort of running to get on. So I think, you know, pausing and just reflecting, maybe journaling. I'm always telling everybody else to journal, and I don't journal, so perhaps that's something I ought to do differently.
Thank you, Caroline. What, Brian, you want to go next?
Yeah, two things for me. So I mentioned about the first company I worked for back in a university, which was Student Pages. The first thing I would, obviously everyone knows this these days, but at the time, getting equity was not a well-known thing. So had I known at the time to get equity, I would have been right in there, because I you know, the company wouldn't have got where it did without my help. But I didn't know I was too young and naive in those days, so I didn't do that. But in my own business since that, I think it's actually just to be braver earlier. I think we all have a bit of imposter syndrome. So there's always a fear that you're not quite good enough, or not quite clever enough, or don't know enough. And I always, when someone asks me a technical question, I always caveat and say, I'm not a bullshitter. I always tell the truth and say, I know this bit, but I don't know about this bit. And I should stop saying I don't know about this bit, because that often gives people a little bit of doubt, when I could, you know, just more confident, and no one knows that little bit, so I don't need to always cover up. But I think generally I could have got to where I am quicker if I'd been just a little bit braver at each step of the way. But I don't know, there's no major regrets, apart from, yeah, I could have done it quicker.
Thank you, Brian. I think we have a question. OJ Doverner, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, I was just going to ask Brian on that, the equity point. How would you go about doing it, would you say, from your point of view?
Well, I don't know how. I mean, I think these days it's much more expected, and companies tend to be more structured to allow for it these days. So people who are doing startups know that the employee is going to look for equity, and probably structure themselves initially with a shareholdings arranged such a way that they can do that. So I think it should be a lot easier. When I was first starting, there were 3 partners who had all the shares. And we did discuss at one point equity when we started a new kind of division. But at that point, again, I was very naive. I was like, this new division is going to lose money for years. Why would I want equity in that? Obviously, nowadays, everyone knows that doesn't matter. But at the time, I was like, well, I don't want to be responsible for these losses. Why would I do that? So I didn't take the opportunity. So I'm not sure how the best way to approach it. I don't know. A lot will depend on the circumstances, but I certainly think it needs to be, if you're a key person in the company, obviously not everyone can get equity in every company, but if you think you're a key person and the company can't do what it's doing without you, then it's definitely a question you need to be asking.
Thank you. So we have a question in the chat from Mario, and it's a question for you, Caroline. You mentioned that you were able to lean on your faith at time of crisis. Was it always so?
I think it was always so, but certainly in times of crisis was a time when I very much leaned on my faith and leaned on friends and family and people around me. And I think it's good to be able to share that, because I think sometimes we, it's very easy to look at other people and think that they've got perfect jobs, perfect lives, perfect couple, perfect this, perfect that. And I know I have done it. And now at the big bad age of 54, I can say, it isn't like that. Don't make assumptions about what's going on in other people's lives, because quite often you're wrong. And it's good to be able to share and be open about the fact that actually, we do go through bumps and scrapes, and it's whether it's your faith or not, or people around you, you need to talk about it, and you need to lean on others to get you through those times. But certainly it was as a result of that I took the leap of faith to start up my business, without doubt.
Thank you, Caroline. Mary?
Yeah, thank you, Sabi. One of the things that I'm interested in is that often, when businesses start up, I think there's sort of almost an expectation that they'll be mega successful really, really quickly. And I don't know, Caroline, Brian, or Margot, whoever's got a thought on it, but do you feel there's any sort of expectation about when a business matures, or how long should people wait before they feel like, no, this is not going right, or whatever?
I'll jump in. I think it depends a lot on what the business involves. I was lucky enough that my business was essentially had very low cost of entry, so all I had to do was buy a laptop to get started, and then any money I earned was profit, essentially. So being successful, I didn't make a huge amount of money for a couple of years, but at least I was making a living. So I didn't, have to worry about whether it was successful or not, because I was surviving. I think it's a lot harder if you're in a business that requires, a lot of cost, or a lot of, where we can't make a profit early on. So I'm not sure the best person to answer the question.
Thank you, Caroline. Do you have any experience from the businesses that you work with as HR?
Well, what I was going to say was, I remember starting up, and actually an electrician was working in the house, and I was like, okay, when am I going to get my first contract? And as soon as you get your first contract, you've spent it, because you're so excited about it. And I remember him saying to me, it took him probably about 3 years to be able to pay himself anything, anything decent. It took him 5 years to feel like he actually had a salary, and that for me was about right. But that's probably, again, because of the sort of business I was in, the pace at which I was working. I mean, I'd be quite open. I'm not doing this to be a millionaire. I'm a bit like Brian. There's a work-life balance to be had, and so that's also important. I think different businesses and different business owners are going to have different expectations in terms of that sort of thing, and I think it very much depends on the type of business, Marie, in terms of actually how soon you can buy your first Porsche.
I don't think that's ever going to happen for me. But thank you. I just think, often we think things will happen really quickly, but there's a reality about it can take time. And, interesting to find out what sort of time scale some people have. And interesting that the sort of electrician and an HR, they're very, clearly very different jobs, and yet you both experienced a similar sort of timescale. So interesting. So thank you.
All right, Sana, do you want to go next?
Yeah, hi. So I think my question is directed to all three of you, but what is that one trait, inherent or acquired, that you think you had to let go of when you started climbing the success ladder? Because I'm sure there's one thing that you had to give up.
Margot, do you want to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely something I'm still working on. I mean, I'm 21, but my dad is actually here, and he can attest to the fact that I am incredibly stubborn, and I always have been, and it's really difficult for me to kind of adjust that. I've had many times, like in my company in Ensemble, where I was set that one of the ways that I was doing it was the correct way, and that's obviously something that's really important to overcome and listen to other people's opinion and input, because often they know better.
Honestly, knowing that just gives me hope for a brighter future.
Caroline, do you want to go next?
That's a really hard question, actually, to think of something just off the top of your head. Certainly sleep is one thing, you know, actually, because there have been a lot of deadlines, and I am one of these people. I'm a slow person in the morning, and I get going as the day progresses, and I'm quite often, you know, still at the computer at midnight, 1 o'clock if I'm working on a project. That's not necessarily a good thing. I wouldn't recommend it. I suppose just being aware of how productive you are and when your best productivity is a good thing to be aware of. I'm sure, Sana, that I will think of many other skills that I have that I want to drop, want to change, but I can't think of anything apart from that off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I think that's one of the most important ones. Trust me.
Yeah. For me, it's, I guess, reticence. I hate boasting. I hate telling people how good I am at stuff, and that's so it's really hard for me to go in and say to someone, I know what I'm talking about, you should listen to me. And that's the thing I've had to very, very, very gradually, and only because I've got these years of experience, I can do that now, that I can say I do know this stuff. But I find it easier in a presentation to turn it into a conversation. So people ask me questions, I can answer their questions no problem. But if I have to say up front why I'm so great, I really struggle. So I find it, so that reticence is the thing I need to lose. But the way I've figured out to lose it is by flipping things around, so people always ask me questions rather than me telling them how good what I know.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. OJ, yes, go ahead.
This is more of a question for Margot. I've recently set up my own business, that's all, and I'm 22 myself. And even though we talked a bit about gender with Caroline, like, have you found a lot of things where people put you down because you're a young person, or any, kind of obstacles because you are younger?
That's a really good question. I think kind of both of those. When I was actually writing this, I was trying to figure out whether to write kind of more like gender focused or age focused, but both of those, unfortunately, yeah. I'm really lucky to have really supportive people in my life, really supportive like family members and friends, but regardless, there's always going to be people in the world who see you as less than them, and that's really hard. I think in my most recent job, getting kind of moved around a lot. I'm 21. I'm an intern technically, even though I'm heading a department. Being seen as an intern is quite frustrating when I put in a lot of work. And I think, I wish there were like, ooh, here's the answer to that, but it's really frustrating, and I guess you just have to keep proving yourself. But I definitely have like felt not discriminated against, because I think that's a bit like too firm of a term, but I've felt, that maybe my age has stopped me from certain things. But in another sense, if you are willing and able to prove yourself, and just kind of be the person who says, yeah, I'm 21, but I know a lot about this, or I'm 22, and just kind of prove yourself and do it. I guess that's my advice. I'm still learning.
Thank you, Margot. Does anyone else have more questions? Please raise your hand if you do. I actually have a question
chat for Margot.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry, Heather had one on the chat for Margot.
Oh, Heather had one on the chat. I'll check quickly. Yes. Margot, when you talked about that timeline for you at the end of your presentation, it was so fast moving. You also talked about learning a lot as well. What is the biggest learn for you, do you think? That's good.
I think the biggest learn is just to kind of fall back on people who are willing to help. As I mentioned, I'm quite stubborn, and I'm pretty much always set on just fixing problems myself when, sometimes that's not the best solution. So yeah, falling back on family, on resources at the university, that kind of thing has brought me amazing places.
I like that. I think the whole thing about asking for help is something that people, can be really poor at, and it is really difficult. A bit like the example Caroline was given around networking, but sometimes the toughest things are the things that make the most difference. A bit like Brian was saying as well about being bold when it feels like the last thing
you really want to do, often the last thing that you feel like you want to do is the thing that gives you the biggest step forward, I think. So I think that's a great answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Margot, there's another question for you in the chat from Richard Ding. How are you able to manage your time so well and do so much while balancing your coursework?
Yeah, still working on it. I think kind of something that I mentioned in my speech is that it's really necessary to prioritize mental health, prioritize that. Often there were times when I was running ensemble that I would have to say, I'm really sorry, it's not a great day for me. Can we push that rental till tomorrow? And that felt really unprofessional and like unnatural for me. But I think something that my parents taught me really well was that, you know, you're always learning in things, but university does come first. And so kind of prioritizing deadlines and with, you know, my work now, prioritizing which, you know, if I spend 5 hours, 5 extra hours that I don't have, will I then get to my dissertation today, or do I just need to say no? And I think, yeah, saying no is another struggle that I've faced. But I mean, my time management comes from kind of organization and having a really busy calendar and having it all like laid out as more like straightforward as I can. But also just being comfortable saying no.
Thank you, Margot. I actually have a question for both Caroline and Brian. So what is one advice you would give to your 20-year-old self? So Brian, do you want to go first?
Well, my 20-year self was still at uni, so I would say have more fun while you can. But also, yeah, it was to be. I was very naive at university. I knew nothing about anything. So it would be, yeah, read, learn as much as you can, figure out how the world actually works. Not just the academic stuff, but actually how business works. I had no clue how business really worked when I was at uni. I was doing a computer science and AI course, so I didn't think about business. So when I went into business, I had no clue what I was doing. So I think you do have the opportunity at university with, you know, organizations like yourselves, the enterprise side and things like that, to learn a bit more about that aspect of life, and set yourself up for the future while still having lots of fun. There you go.
Caroline?
I was very underconfident at 20, and probably all through my 20s, maybe until I got married for the second time, to be honest. But so I would say to my younger self, just be a bit more assertive, be more confident in your skills and what you can do. Don't be, you know, big-headed or, you know, too pushy, but just be a bit more assertive and confident in what you've got, because I definitely wasn't, and I could have done a lot more if I'd actually just believed in myself a bit more.
Thank you, Brian and Caroline. Are there more questions? Feel free to put them in the chat or just raise your hand. Whilst we wait, I have a question for Margot. So Margot, you were talking a bit about how you're not managing ensemble anymore. So do you think you'll go towards another entrepreneurial venture later on in the future? Is that something that attracts you?
Yeah, like very, very much so. I'm currently kind of pursuing law school, and I think it's a bit different in the US that, and I'm actually, you know, pursuing law school over here, but in the US, it's actually pretty common to pursue law if you're going into business. So, you know, changing that up a bit, and I think I'm going to go into that. Honestly, I just can't imagine leaving school just yet. So I do definitely just want to, I want to pursue law kind of just for a personal interest. And maybe I will, you know, go into law, but ideally, you know, to make that and take that into a company long term.
That makes sense. Thank you. Are there any more questions? Oh, yes, Bonnie, go ahead.
Caroline, you talked a little bit about being selective about some of the customers and the clients that you take. And maybe for Brian and possibly Margot as well, because yours was kind of a one-on-one business. Can you say a little bit more about how you go about identifying, yes, this is the right customer, the right client for me, so therefore this is one that I want to work with?
I think I'm still learning, to be honest, about that, Bonnie. I mean, I haven't got it right all the time, and sometimes it's actually with hindsight that there's an opportunity to get out of the contract. There's a sort of natural, because I'm not charging a retainer for my services. So after you've done a particular project, there is a natural break, and so I've been able to take advantage of some of the natural breaks and then just move away. So I'm definitely not the finished article about this. I think, though, that there are some organisations that you go to for your first, hour or so, and after about 3 hours, they've bled you dry, and you're not going to work with them. That's an easy one for sure. So people who, for me, it's been people who didn't share my values and people who just took the mickey in terms of actually my time and not valuing me, I suppose, as well. That's probably, maybe in about 5 years' time, I'll be able to give you some more. But at the moment, that's the sort of, that's been my experience anyway.
Because I guess there's a tendency, if you're kind of running your own business in the way that you are, to take all the business that's coming because you don't know when the next client's going to come along. So for me, that's one thing in speaking to a lot of people who are self-employed to be really wary of, because you take a contract that isn't the right one for you and you end up not doing a good job with it or not satisfying them anyway.
Yes, and not enjoying it, and therefore
Absolutely.
not giving of your best. And of course, that's really important in terms of testimonials. And actually, just you want that value. Everybody wants that value. So I absolutely get that. And I think that early doors, it's just you just take everything and anything, and you do. I think it is a skill that you have to learn, and I've had to learn it, and I've certainly made mistakes along the way. I don't know about Brian or Margot as well. I'm sure they'll have other ways of doing it.
Yeah, it's something I definitely, like you say, in the early years, you take everything that comes and live with it. And as we've been in business for quite a long time and taken on bigger and bigger projects, we've hung on to some of the original customers, and some of them are great, lovely people, and we love working with them. Some of them are a pain in the neck, and we've just had to gradually wean them off. And then we have not done it very rarely, but you either put up your prices or I'd like to think I haven't just sat and not responded to emails, but that has happened once or twice. But more recently, I mean, we've had some very recent that we've worked with once on a project, and they were just a nightmare to deal with. They would just, they would email it. Well, they wouldn't even email. We have a ticketing system for issues with systems. So we say always put your ticket in the system, then it'll get tracked. Everyone can see it. They refused to do that. They would put everything in a chat, their own chat client, which we didn't use anyway. They would do it at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then expect an answer the next day when they were asleep, so you couldn't speak to them, and they just were told to pay the next. So as Caroline said, when that project finished, when they got back to the next project, we're just like, sorry, we're too busy. So I'm really sorry, guys. Come back in 6 months' time. We might be able to fit you in then. And then they did come back in 6 months' time. I was like, oh no.
Oh dear.
So it's like, oh, another big project's come in, guys. Really sorry. Try these people instead. So yeah, it happens. But yeah, it's even at that point, it's difficult to think we could have fit them in, but remember what a pain they were last time? No, let's not do it.
So I notice Alan just posted up in chat that ad legend David Ogilvy made a great list of criteria for choosing clients. So maybe worth a look. It's great, thank you.
Thank you. So are there any more questions?
Sabine, can I just say thank you then if everyone is finishing up on behalf of the business club before we all get cut off. So just, yeah, it's been absolutely fascinating. I really loved hearing from Brian and Caroline and Margot. And I think lots of really sensible things, not the sort of, big bang whiz stuff that you, as Brian said, you see on The Apprentice or maybe Dragon's Den or something like that, but actually advice and business guidance that can help people have a long-term strategy that gives them a very good business for their whole working life, and something to be proud of and to make a real success of. And I love, Margot, that you're doing so much at your stage, and that's just so inspiring and wonderful. And you should be very proud of yourself, and don't make any excuses for being young. An age, the number doesn't matter. It's what you do with your life and how you are and how you present yourself, and the value that you offer to other people. It really doesn't matter whether you're a man, a woman, young or old. We should all value the experience and the information that we can get from other people. Also to say thank you so much to Sabi and Emily and to Bonnie for organising it, and for allowing us to be part of this really lovely evening. I've absolutely thoroughly enjoyed it, and I really hope that we will connect with you again. Well, even connect with you again in other ways, but also this time next year, hopefully, for another enterprise event, when hopefully we will actually be somewhere we can have some food and drink together, and who knows. But yeah, and to everybody who's attended and listened, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Mary. I hope next year we can go back to the way it was last year as well. Yeah, I just want to thank all of the speakers as well. I think it was all very insightful, very interesting, and very inspiring. I don't have a business idea. I wish I did. But all of you have inspired me so much. I hope I do come up with one at some point. I also want to thank the audience, the students who are here today, members of the business club, and the wider community, who were very interactive, asked very insightful questions, and I think it all went really well. So thank you for joining us today.
And just before we close, can I remind everyone that we have 2 more events tomorrow as part of Enterprise Week. At 1 o'clock, we have Conrad Urban, who's a St Andrews alumni, and his business is called Knit Places. And at 4:30, we have Ejaj Ahmed, who founded the Bangladesh Youth Leadership Center. And everyone, whether you're a guest, a member of St Andrews Business Club, a student, you're very welcome to join. And I think the details have been publicized of how to do that.
You can just go to our Facebook page and you'll find the registration link there, or on our Instagram. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today.
Take care. Thanks ever so much. Thank you. Thank you for asking. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.